Man, I don't know if y'all noticed, but the 90s had a lot of scary stuff for kids. I'm talking movies, TV shows, books, even some cool horror adjacent computer games. And honestly, it was pretty awesome, I ain't gonna lie. But see, looking back at my parents' generation, the 70s and the 80s, they ain't really have a lot of kid-friendly horror media outside of Scooby-Doo. I mean, unless you count those unintentionally creepy dark fantasy movies like Return to Oz and The Dark Crystal, but let's be honest, those wasn't exactly designed to give kids a fun little spook. They just so happened to be a little unsettling because of their vibes. But see, then came the 90s and something really changed. Suddenly there was this huge wave of horror that just was made specifically for kids, and not just one-off titles either. I'm talking an entire movement. It wasn't just here's a spooky little Halloween special once a year. It was a whole buffet of creepy content. Like somebody at a TV network said, hey, what if we made horror, but made it cute enough to sell toys? You know what I'm saying? And honestly, it might have been way more than you remember. So let's take a trip down memory lane and talk about the rise of children's horror in the 90s. Let's start with the king of 90s kids horror, Goosebumps. If you were alive back then you definitely remember these books. R.L. Stine cranked out Goosebumps books like they were on an assembly line. Literally over 60 titles in the original series alone. These books had it all. Haunted masks, living dummies, evil cameras, mutant plants, you name it. And every single story had some kind of fun, creepy twist that was just enough to give you the chills, but not enough to actually give you nightmares. Well, maybe just a few nightmares, depending on how easily scared you were. 'Cause I ain't gonna front, that mask was a little creepy. But see, then there was the Goosebumps TV show, and man, the Goosebumps theme song alone deserves its own award. Those creepy dog eyes that was glowing green, and the wind that was blowing the G into the middle of nowhere, straight up iconic. The show was like a low-budget, kid-friendly version of the Twilight Zone. It had cheesy effects and all, but for a kid, it was perfect. And then there was episodes like The Haunted Mask and Night of the Living Dummy that were absolutely terrifying for their time. You just knew that when that narrator said,
"Viewers beware, you're in for a scare,"
you were about to have a good damn time. Now, Goosebumps was hard, I ain't gonna lie, but Are You Afraid of the Dark? That right there was my This show was the blueprint for everything kid-friendly and spooky. Airing on Nickelodeon as a part of the Snick lineup, it had just the right mix of creepy vibes and campy storytelling. Every episode was presented as a tale told by the Midnight Society, a group of teens who met around a campfire to share their scary stories. And see, these wasn't just your run-of-the-mill ghost stories, man. They had some real range. Some episodes dealt with classic spooky stuff like haunted houses and evil clowns. You know, like the tale of Laughing in the Dark. That thing still haunts me to this day. And it had your cursed objects as well. But see, others, it got a little weird, bruh. Like there was this episode about a pool monster called The Tale of Dead Man's Float. That episode introduced us to one of the most terrifying creatures in 90s kids TV history. Or the one with the vampire cab driver, from The Tale of the Night Shift. See, one of the reasons why Are You Afraid of the Dark stood out was his willingness to push boundaries. See, it didn't really sugarcoat its scares. It leaned into them. For a kid show in the 90s, it felt like you was watching something that you probably shouldn't be watching. It had just enough edge to keep you on the edge of your seat, but not so much that it would scar you for life. Well, at least not too much. And the production value was surprisingly solid for a kid show. The sound effects were amazing, it had eerie lighting, and the setting was just genuinely unsettling. And the costumes and makeup were actually pretty good. Plus, it had a way of making even the most ordinary things like mirrors and comic books and dolls feel sinister. The intro alone deserves its own Hall of Fame recognition. Remember those swings creaking on their own, the mats lighting up in the darkness, that haunted piano theme? Yeah, Are You Afraid of the Dark may very well be one of my favorite TV themes of all time. And honestly, Are You Afraid of the Dark was a lot of our very first introduction to the horror genre, alongside Goosebumps, of course. Speaking of books though, we cannot talk about 90s kid horror without mentioning Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. If you know, then you know. The illustrations in these books were just straight up nightmare fuel. Stephen Gamel's art, yeah, that was That was borderline psychological warfare for children. The stories themselves were spooky and often short enough to retell at sleepovers, but it was the drawings that really stuck with you. Like, I'm pretty sure I'll be on my deathbed still thinking about that woman who ain't had her eyes and that melting skeleton thing. Yeah, I'm probably gonna be reminiscing about that for the rest of my life. But see, there were also lighter and equally fun spooky books like In a Dark, Dark Room and Other Scary Stories. That series was aimed at younger kids, and let me tell you, that story about the green ribbon messed up a whole generation. Like, who knew a story about a girl with a detachable head could traumatize second graders across the country? Even books like Animorphs, some of those stories were a little odd, I ain't gonna front. Like, the 90s really had kids who loved books. The Scholastic Book Fair had whole aisles and whole sections that was just straight dedicated to horror books. The 90s also had other kids' horror TV shows like Eerie, Indiana. See, before Stranger Things gave us the Upside Down, there was Eerie, Indiana.
Eerie, Indiana, my home sweet home.
This show was way ahead of its time. It was about a kid named Marshall who moves to a town where everything was just off. Like, we're talking people keeping Tupperware sealed leftovers of themselves and a guy that was literally Elvis in hiding. It was part horror, part sci-fi, and a whole lot of weird. Think about it like a kid's version of the X-Files with a little bit of Twin Peaks thrown in. It didn't last very long, but it's a cult classic for a reason. Oh, but wait, we gotta talk about everybody's favorite scary puppy, man. Courage the Cowardly Dog, which was straight up cartoon nightmare fuel in itself.
We interrupt this program to bring you Courage the Cowardly Dog Show, starring Courage the Cowardly Dog.
This show deserves its own Hall of Fame in the how in the hell did this get approved for kids category. Man, you had creepy mummies, demonic cats, and whatever the hell that CGI floating head thing that kept saying return the slab.
Return the slab.
What?
Return the slab. Oh, suffer my curse.
Courage was basically a fever dream that somehow still made you laugh and then scared you to death 5 minutes later. But while Nickelodeon gave us a banger like Are You Afraid of the Dark and Cartoon Network giving us Courage the Cowardly Dog, we gotta highlight those Disney Halloween classics, because the 90s was the golden era of Disney horror. You had movies like Hocus Pocus, the obvious big one. Honestly, it deserves its own holiday at this point. The Sanderson sisters were campy, creepy, and iconic. But then you had other gems like Don't Look Under the Bed. You know, that one actually did kind of terrify me as a kid. A boogeyman with creepy long nails and glowing eyes. Disney wasn't pulling no punches on that one, bro. Even the animated movies had their own creepy moments. Nightmare Before Christmas blurred the lines between Christmas and Halloween. Then you had movies like Casper that gave us a surprisingly emotional story about a friendly ghost that still managed to have a few creepy moments. The whole, can I keep you scene was heartwarming, but creepy at the same time.
Cat, can I keep you? That's weird.
Disney also had this other little hidden gem of a show. I don't know if y'all remember it. It was called So Weird. It followed a girl named Fiona who traveled with her mom's band while investigating supernatural phenomena. It was surprisingly dark for a Disney show, with episodes about ghosts and time loops and cursed objects, and it had a real edge to it. And honestly, I don't feel like it gets enough credit, but kind of can't blame it because it didn't last that long. But overall, it was still a solid show, and this whole lineup that I'm discussing just proves that Disney in the 90s was undefeated. Another little hidden gem of a show, man. Who could forget Freaky Stories? That show was basically urban legends for kids. It had gross out humor and creepy crawly little twists to it. It always started with "This is a true story. It happened to a friend of mine." Even though we know that was a lie, it didn't happen to nobody. But hey, at the end of the day, it still gave you the chills. And see, the 90s wasn't just about the big names. There was so many little moments that made kid-friendly horror like the big thing. Had shows like Tales from the Crypt Keeper, Beetlejuice the animated series, all the Nickelodeon Halloween specials. And like I said earlier, those Scholastic Book Fairs had entire shelves dedicated to nothing but straight spooky books. It was truly an era of life that should be cherished. So, why was the 90s so horror obsessed? Well, maybe it was the cultural climate. Media wasn't as censored as it was in the 70s and the 80s in our parents' generation, so a lot of showrunners just felt a lot more comfortable pushing the boundaries. The 90s was truly a weirdly experimental time. It's like every creator back then was basically like, how much can these kids handle? And honestly, I think they got it right. Because here's the thing, horror teaches us how to face our fears. It's thrilling, it's fun, and it's the perfect way for kids to learn that not everything that goes bump in the night is something to be afraid of. And looking back, Those shows, books, and movies didn't just entertain us, they shaped who we are. And that's why I feel like millennials especially are the biggest horror Halloween loving generation of all time. And for that, I say thank you to the 90s. You were spooky as hell, and we loved every second of it. That concludes today's video, ladies and gentlemen. If you enjoyed the video, I would appreciate a like and a comment, and definitely a subscription to my channel. For all my return viewers, welcome back, gang. I hope to see y'all in the next video. And like I always say, man, y'all stay spooky.